Welcome to the School of Wedding Photography. I'm here this morning with Adonye Jaja, a Denver-based photographer, and Rangefinder's 30 Rising Stars of Wedding Photography 2016.
Hey,
Hey man, how you doing?
I'm good to be on
Good.
here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
I'm going to put some of your images up now, and I think it's interesting to note that AD describes himself as not a wedding photographer. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I think wedding photography, we put ourselves in this box. So, like inside, if you think about music, you think, oh, here's reggae music, and here's this other type of music. And some types of music are labeled more about their content than the actual type of music that it is. And so inside wedding photography, we're labeled for our content, even though I might shoot a street style image in wedding at a wedding, or I might shoot, a really beautiful fine art image, but it's at a wedding. Since I'm labeled a wedding photographer, everything's looked at through that certain lens that it's, and I think for a while it was lesser than the other art forms of photography. And so when I think about weddings, even though I mean, I'm still providing a service. I don't think in terms of, okay, they must have X, Y, and Z. I think in terms of how I feel and what I want and what I want to do. And I still give my clients kind of, the basic things, but I don't think of myself as a wedding photographer. I think of myself as a photographer who goes to weddings.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. You said something you said then was interesting. The art form of photography, which it's easy to forget in an industry that kind of sometimes doesn't feel like it's very arty. It's very sort of copycatty.
Right.
Um,
Sure.
and how do you feel about that?
Uh, Mate, I don't mind. Okay, so if we think about photography in its earliest conception, uh, the word that the word that comes to mind is mimesis, mimetic. Like it was a mimetic art. It was copying in the beginning. And so I'm not necessarily, we can't show anything that isn't already in existence. So in a way, we are copying
Mm,
all the time.
mm,
And so I take a pill when I say, oh, I've created this great image because I'm showing people. I like Susan Sontag in her book. She says on photography, she says you can show people a world that exists or a world that you'd like to exist.
yeah.
And those two ideas, I think, although they're very subtle, the line is subtle. That's kind of the line we toe as photographers. And
Yeah.
so, one, the world that exists is copying, and I think once we stray away from that to kind of show people, hey, this is another version of what you see, or this is the way I see it, and
Yeah.
the art coming back into it is changing and showing people a different way to look at it, even though in its essence it's still copying, it's still mimetic, and so in a way, I know photographers will hate me for saying that, but I
Uh-huh.
think it's true. Like we are copiers. That's the first photographer was, that's what it was called. It was a copy machine.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, yeah,
And how important to you is art in your work?
uh, it's, it's everything. I think, I've kind of, I started out kind of in that world looking to do something, honest. And so is art important to me? Yeah, it's fully important. But I also, if I'm being fully honest now, is that I'm learning to juggle the two worlds of, hey, this is for my clients, and I am providing a service, and so I'm working with them. I'm working for planners. I'm working for my clients to make imagery, but my selling point is that it's going to be different than anything you've ever seen. It's not going to be, I'm going to try to put myself in the image so much so that you don't like, no one else would get that image if they were there. And I think my strongest images are that there's so much like of myself that, if another photographer would have been there and they'll say, I don't know how you saw that. And I think that's it. I think for me anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. Does that sort of sustain you when you're working, a 12-hour day and you're exhausted and this week on
Yeah.
week doing the same thing?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah,
There's no way to take the grind out of photography. I think it looks glamorous on the outside, and I could very romantically say, oh yeah, like I eat wedding photography and it's amazing.
yeah,
But
yeah.
no, you have to work. You have to edit. When we're finished with this call, I'll edit for another couple hours, and so it's work on the wedding day. My feet hurt, and so it's but I do hear people talking about sort of this oh, wedding photography is a young man's game, or and I'm like, really? Like, I could see myself doing this for another 10 to 15 years or even longer. And they're always, I guess a lot of the younger photographers are talking about exit strategies, and they want to do this for the next 15 or so years, or not even that long, 5 years. And I get it, but I think there's an element of it for me that is like a passion, like a lifelong passion. Like, I want it to sustain me. I want to do this until I'm old. And so,
What age
yeah.
will you be in 15 years?
Oh dang, I'll be 50. Golly, yeah, life, man. I'll
Yeah.
be 50 in 15 years.
Goes
Yeah, which
quickly.
I think, yeah, I don't know. Do you know any like 50 or 60-year-old photographers or
Yeah, I do
wedding
actually.
photographers?
I do. Not
Yeah.
many. Not many.
Okay.
Very few. And there's one I'm
Yeah.
thinking of. He must be mid 60s, and he's been doing this forever.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I imagine you have to pare back. I don't imagine you're doing 14-hour weddings when you're 65.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I wouldn't want to do that either.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Gosh, I try not to shoot long days now. I shoot 10 hours, maybe six
Yeah.
to 10 are kind of my packages. If someone really asks for something more, but
Yeah.
I just know you get tired and
Yeah.
when you're trying to think differently, your mind gets tired. And so a lot of coffee, but
Yeah.
I try not to shoot so many weddings, and I try not to shoot too long on the day because it's just a lot. And so,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah.
Have you? Is that something that's changed over time? Did you sort of start off with longer and packages and work back longer coverage?
No, I started this way. I started shooting about 8 hours. Uh, and I think I did a few long, like Indian weddings,
Yeah.
and I was just like, I haven't, at some point it slips back to just showing the world as it is. And that's where I die, and so
Yeah.
I don't, unless someone really wants it, it's a little bit overkill for me. And so I stop around 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's hop back a bit. Can you just tell us a little bit about you, what your story is?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I was born in Nigeria
Okay.
and moved to the States with my family when I was 6 months old. So I was just a little kid, and I lived in Kentucky. I went to college in South Georgia, at a place called Georgia Southern, studied psychology.
Okay.
Then I did this thing called AmeriCorps, which is kind of like what we have here, the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a big thing in my life. So I started to travel more. So I lived kind of in South Georgia, but with AmeriCorps, you travel around the states. So I got to see kind of poverty all around the states and just sort of different aspects of American life.
Yeah.
And then from there, I moved to Colorado, and I started working as a window cleaner, and that was my job. That's what I did in college
Yeah.
to make money. And so afterwards, I just kept doing it, and I started a business doing that, and it was good. But on the weekends, I found a photographer that I liked, and I asked him if I could work for him, just very randomly. I just kind of was like, hey, I'd love to second shoot or assist you. I didn't know anything about the world of photography. This guy I didn't know at the time. He was a really good photographer, and he literally taught me everything I know. At one point, we were working, or after a wedding, he was like, AD, you're good enough to do this on your own. And I was like, oh. And that night, he helped me make a website.
Oh, wow.
It's so funny.
That's nice.
He helped me make a website, and that's how I started shooting. Like, yeah.
So it was completely random, or I mean, there must have been some motivation for you to approach this photographer.
No, I honestly, this sounds like it sounds a little fake, but I always thought photography. I always I was that dork with the camera at a wedding that was in the way, that was just like, yeah, I could do this, and I never knew what I was doing, and I always thought, man, I don't want to have to pay someone to photograph my kids when I have kids one day. I wish I knew how to do this really well.
Yeah.
And so that's where it started. I met the guy through a friend. We met for coffee, not even related to photography.
Yeah,
We just
okay.
met, when I moved to town, and uh, he was like, I'm a photographer. I was like, oh, well, if you ever need an assistant, I'd love to come with you. And he was like, okay. In my mind, I just wanted to know my little Rebel camera well enough to, to make my own photos. And it was him. He told me, like, hey, you can do this if you want to. And I was like, oh, and now that's all I do. Is
Yeah.
around
Yeah.
shooting weddings. So
It's funny how people, in different ways, people come to this same thing,
yeah.
different paths we
And
take.
what about you? Yeah. How did you get started in this, man?
I was working in a corporate job and hated it, and I quit and went traveling and with my camera, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I was like,
Right.
oh, actually,
Wow.
I'm photographing every day, and I kind of like this. Maybe I should pursue this. But it had never been
Oh,
sort of
wow.
part of my, family's idea. Pursuing the arts was not a thing, so it was
Sure.
a big step out, in a different direction for me. But yeah, that was
Yeah.
the path.
I'm the same way. My sister's a lawyer. My other sister's a doctor, and
Yeah.
my dad, he was always like, "Hey, so you're gonna go back to school and blah, and but this is it. I think, like I'm doing it, and I'm so fulfilled, and I'm so much more myself than I was in school or doing anything else. So I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
What
get
What
that.
do you think gives you that fulfillment about photography?
Oh wow, you're asking the real questions,
Yeah,
man. Oh.
man.
Um, I mean, I think we all have some sort of like ability to create. Some of us can let that out better than others, but um, once you've tapped into that and you're able to kind of show people yourself, I think that fulfillment can come through almost anything once you let your guard down and actually say, okay, this is me, this is what I'm doing. And um, so I think the fulfillment comes in me making the images that I dream about. Like, and
Yeah.
for me, that's odd, and it seems kind of like who is this guy? But I love it. I love weddings, and so
Yeah.
my story is one of like I appreciate romance, and so it actually just makes sense. Like I would do nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's sort of about you've said a couple of things there, communicating and sort of being true to who you are, and not presenting an image, but actually just being you in your work. And
Right.
do you think that's where the
Yeah,
sort of fulfillment
100%.
is from? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think in any job, if especially in creating, like when you're putting out art, I think we learn really quickly how to, pursue music. And when people are pursuing music, or I also do a lot of dancing, right? Or swing dancing. And you teach people kind of how to swing dance, and you teach them the steps and the patterns and the movements. And then at some point, once they learn it, you have to say, okay, now forget everything that you've learned
Yeah.
and just go dance. And I
Yeah,
think
okay.
you're never truly dancing until you can forget it and just be free. And so I was talking to a buddy just the other day, and I was talking to him about reading my manual for my camera. He was like, "What? Why would you read the manual?" I was like, "Well, that's my job. I'm a professional. I should know everything about it." But believe me, my goal is to read it and then to forget it, and then in a way, is to know the techniques, and then to just go see, and as the greats would say, to feel and then to shoot. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Okay.
so I think fulfillment's in there somewhere, and just like learning everything you can, and then just like being okay with being yourself and just making the photo that feels right to you.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're dancing, do you get, or have you gotten to that sort of state of flow where you're not thinking and you're just
Yeah,
there?
yeah. I think, man, it's funny that you asked that because it's harder for me to get there with photography, but with dancing, very much so. I've also been dancing so much longer,
Yeah.
and I've studied it, and so that's but that state of flow that you're talking about, where everything kind of comes in line, and you're not thinking, you're just reacting, and it's fast, and
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I get there with dancing quite a bit. With photography, I don't know. Sometimes I wish I could run and get like my energy up and just like really like sprint and then start shooting or listen to music because I think I would get there sooner.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, sometimes it's me just the camera's in the way a little bit. I'm just like, "Ugh,
Yeah.
what's this style and and then finally, okay, we're there and I can ease into it. But there's the mechanics of the camera that you have to get through. You have to know it well. Um, I think anyway. And then once you get through that, then you can try to get into
It
flow.
becomes part of you, and then you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a obstruction to what you want to feel or do, create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
What
interesting that you mentioned that. Sorry. Do you feel that flow when uh, when you're shooting? Do you get to that space?
Occasionally, very
Yeah.
occasionally, yeah. And but
Mhm.
then there's also this other voice going, "Oh, I'm in flow. That's interesting." Um,
And then you drop out of it. You're like,
yeah,
no.
yeah. No, stay there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, and it's nice. I think I actually would say I often feel it more when I'm editing. Oddly, um,
Huh? Oh, that's
yeah.
interesting.
Which, yeah, I don't know what that's about. Maybe I'm just more comfortable sitting at the computer rather than a
Yeah.
room full of people and
Sure.
and a
Sure.
camera. Yeah,
I mean, with thinking about the idea, I mean, editing is a really big part of what we do,
mm,
and so I think it's important. I heard a photographer, I was talking to him online, and he was talking about cropping your photos or something, and he said, he was like, photographers don't like cropping because they believe in their vision more than they believe in their image. And I was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, tell me more about that. What he said was that photographers, like some images have a story to tell, and you might have an image or a vision in your head that's different, but the image has power. And so cropping it and editing it right lets the image sing. And it was like a really interesting idea because I was like, because I'm not really sure what I think about cropping. I do crop, here and there, but it's sort of like this prideful thing where I'm like, no, like this is how I shot it. And this guy was like, no, like crop it and let the image tell its story because it's more important than how close you were to the person
yeah,
when you were shooting on a prime lens and you didn't, you couldn't get two steps in, and now the story won't be told as well. And I
yeah.
was like, wow,
I mean,
that's so interesting.
that's an
So it's really
interesting
cool.
point about when is the image created.
Yeah,
Does it have to be at the camera moment? Can it be later?
sure. Or both. I think it's both. I
Yeah,
think we're editing and or sort of post processing is just as important, and
yeah,
curating is just as important. I'm learning
yep,
that now. Is like deleting and deleting and deleting and just like
yep,
is so much. It all lends itself to this overall view of your work and
yeah.
uh,
This is. Do you have a brand over there called John West?
John West.
It's like
Mm,
salmon, tinned fish.
no,
Oh, okay.
what's
Maybe it's an Australian thing. I don't know. But they have their sort of slogan is, "It's the fish that John West rejects that makes John West the best."
ooh wow, I
And
like
I
that.
often think
Yeah,
about that because it's like, okay, I've got to take all these images out and just be left with the essence of what we
sure.
want. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, I just kind of I had a really big shoot. So one of the biggest clients of my career, right? And we took him on this really amazing 5-hour engagement shoot, which is ridiculous. And you're like, oh, I could worse. But 5 hours in like one city. It was
Yeah.
anyway. It was a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I wanted to give them sort of everything, and we shot him in different ways, and I kind of got really romantic about how I wanted to see them. And so there's this idea of to know someone, you should know them in every season. And so I wanted to photograph them, even though in one day I wanted to show them the different seasons of themselves. Like, listen, I was going super, and I did it. And I had a second photographer with me, and I told him all about this idea. I was like, all right, guys, we're gonna shoot them. Think about winter and fall and spring and summer and what that looks like for imagery. And when I delivered the gallery, I wrote this eloquent piece about it. And then I wrote, and then I had the fall collection, the winter collection, and then they saw the photos and they were like, their response was they loved the photos, but I had given them way too many. I inundated them with like picture after picture after picture and like fall and blah. Yeah. And now when I look back and I was like, wow, I could have just, if I had just, there were like 400 or 500 photos in this engagement shoot. You know what I mean? And it's too many to give a client. I'm used to looking at a lot of photos, and we create so quickly that we think that just give them, and so learning now is like, if I had just given them 5 of each or something like the bangers, and then I could have still given them another 100 images or whatever. I think it would have sang so much more, even though I had all the best intentions, but it was clouded and it wasn't as curated as it could have been. Anyway, I'm probably said too much, but that's the truth of what I'm going through, and so I'm thinking about curating and throwing away fish is,
It's interesting you say that, because I had a client say to me recently that they picked me because my work stood out from about 5 other websites they'd looked at that morning. And I said, okay, that's interesting. And I've been putting together this list of, every year I do a list of the 100 best wedding photographers in the world, which is just completely arbitrary. And it's not arbitrary. It's my personal opinion rather than anything scientific.
Cool.
But in looking through like a lot of portfolios, that's something that really jumps out at me. That I feel like I'm seeing the same person shooting over and over and over, and the people that stop and go, no, okay, I'm going to do this differently, or I'm going to do this my way, or actually, or maybe they've brought more time into their photography so that they're expressing themselves, not just copying others. They're the ones that stand out.
Right.
So it's the same idea. It's about sort of filtering it down and curating.
No, that's strong, and I think it's so true. And I think I was lucky because I started shooting with that guy I was telling you about. He literally was just like, he gave me a camera and he said, hey, go do whatever you want. Like, and he never taught me how to be a wedding photographer. He just said, shoot whatever you want. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, listen, I can cover the wedding. You're just kind of here. Just go take a picture. And I was like, oh. And so I started with that thought of, I just shoot whatever I want to shoot. And slowly I've had to like add in stuff that the client wants, which is cool. I get it. I'm not crazy. But, but at the same time, I think just having a desire is important. Like, having a desire to actually make an image apart from the wedding, just
an artistic image as opposed to a desire to build a brand.
Sure. I just think that if you view it as a job, it'll just be a job. And if you have the want to like, hey, I want to go and make something different. Not that that's all it takes, but you just have to push yourself, and then also like try to think about what beauty is to you, or whatever it is that you're working on. I think, we look at Instagram or whatever, and we have one sort of idea of, oh, this is a beautiful sunlit bride, and that's what beauty is. And then we reproduce that. But I think photography itself even took a turn when they decided that beauty wasn't just, at sunset, that beauty could be a milk carton on the side of a building, and that these ugly things could be beautiful. All of a sudden, there are all these different voices in the way we see things, and that's being you. Is figuring out what beauty is, or not just beauty, what what ugliness is, what all that stuff is to you personally. If you kind of distill that down, then you start making images that'll speak to a different group of people. Then you find your clients. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who are you?
Well, I mean,
What do you bring to your images?
yeah, sure. I think there's truth in the fact that I'm single, and this is weird, but I'm a single wedding photographer, and I was teaching this class of kids, and they were like, "Wait, you're single? Like, what does that mean? How can you be a wedding photographer and be single?" And that's the only question these girls would ask me. It was so funny, and they were high school girls. It was silly,
Yeah.
um, but I think that's part of it. Like for me, there's this like I see all these weddings, and if I think about who I am right now, is there's this sort of idea of grace and beauty that my brides possess, and so I literally put that on them, and
Yeah.
that's my view of what I might be looking for, and so it's important for me to know what I'm looking for, and then also to know that I'm looking for it in photography, and so I have this. I don't really like styled shoots, and I'll explain why. I think most of the styled shoots just look like weddings. Yeah, they're just like, oh, you have some really pretty people, but then it just looks like a wedding, and it's just kind of like, not that, listen, I get why they do it, but it's a little boring. And I think our first step in progressing wedding photography is to do what Vogue does when they show off new clothes, is they say, hey, this is like our largest vision. Then you sort of get ideas of what that looks like. And I think that's what I want to do, the style shoot. And I have this idea of a style shoot where it's not something that could be an actual wedding. Like, so in my backyard right now, I'm building a table that's 16 feet tall. Like, it's really odd, but the idea is that there's this thing that I haven't attained yet, which is a wedding. And so when I think about who I am, blah blah blah, I want to say that through a photograph, and then also like show it off, at weddings, because that's how I speak to the world right now. And so
Yeah.
I don't know if that's kind of an abstract way to say, like, what I'm doing is I'm showing you who I am, hopefully through the photos. I can't say it with words as much as I can say, look and see what I'm trying to do, and then and hopefully it's there.
Oh, it's there. I can see it in the imagery. There's a clear there's a you that comes across. It's very clear. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
No, well, it's nice as a viewer to suddenly get a connection with a sort of a set of imagery, and sort of realize that actually you're getting a connection with a person there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the fact that you photograph weddings, you're single, you like dancing, which is also about sort of connecting with people. And I think you said in one of your Instagram photos something about, I don't know if I've ever felt true love. Does that sound right?
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah. Let's get in there, man.
Dang, bro. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly a romantic part of it, but I've just tried to like start being myself a little more on Instagram, and I think that's true. I think even though the wedding day is sort of this perfect view of what marriage looks like, and everything's just like amazing and everyone's happy, I still see it a lot, and I see a lot of those days. I see a lot of amazing days, and so I like to see, I like to watch those moments. I like to see, the bride and groom think about kissing, and then, we do it, we see it, and we're like, oh, they're about to kiss. And I like those moments. I think it's sweet. And so I don't, I mean, I'm sure there are people that I have loved, but I love this sort of amazing expression of it at weddings. And so I think what I said was they teach me, in very small ways, different ways love, or to, what love is. And so that's, I mean, that's my truth. And so I hope to one day be there and get that. But until then, I'll just keep shooting.
Do you think you shoot weddings because that's important to you? Connection and love.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, man, we're really getting into it, bro. Like, I'm a sap. I'm a hopeless romantic. And I know that to be true, especially from past relationships.
Yeah.
And so I think that it fits well when I say it's more me, is because I really love love. Like,
Yeah.
I really just, I dig it. And so even though it's, I'm still a man's man. I'm still, but at the same time, I get it and I like it. And,
I don't think being a man doesn't mean you can enjoy love.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but yeah, 100%. I think, yeah,
In fact, I
I've
think
never, yeah,
if you have to, um, yeah, no, anyway, it's
yeah, no, I think it is part of being a man, and it's lovely. And so, yeah,
With
I always think about what it'd be like, you know, obviously, since I shoot so many weddings, it's like, man, what's my wedding gonna be like,
yeah,
and if that happens. And so that's what I meant when I said that, just kind of
yeah.
like, wow, I don't really know, but man, that would be nice. It'd be cool if that moment over there happened. And I kind of shoot the way I would want my wedding to be photographed. I would want it, to be captured well, and then artistic and some sort of a feel to it. And so, yeah.
So, being at a lot of weddings hasn't made you jaded about the idea of actually getting married yourself?
No,
No.
I mean, I guess there's part of it that's kind of like, man, I don't want to spend a lot of money,
Yeah.
like, I don't think that that's necessary all the time. But I love that, to my clients, that's part of how they express themselves and express their affection, is through throwing a big party. And that makes sense to me. I get it.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think I would elope. I don't see anything wrong with it, but I see, like, the families come together, and I get it. So I'm not,
Yeah.
it's an expression of their love. And I think, I mean, I think too is that weddings are, a lot of wedding photography looks alike because a lot of weddings look alike. And so, unfortunately, people aren't being their true selves when they host a party or have a party. They're just kind of like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And probably you were the same. Some of our favorite weddings are when the bride and groom were totally themselves, and the party was totally different, and it was totally like who they are. And then I can be totally who I am. And then it's just like, all bets are off. We're going to make some photos,
Oh, yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then, but if it's the same thing over and over again, then it's like, who are you finding? Like, your photos will start looking similar, and they won't challenge you, which, listen, I shoot it all, so whatever. But
Yeah, no, I know. Oh, I mean, there's definitely we have to shoot the sort of the script. We have to do certain things, but
yeah,
it's for me, it's the other stuff that keeps me going.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree with that.
yeah.
Yeah,
All right, let's get away from love and connection and all
yeah, man.
the tough
Wow.
questions.
Like,
No, it's all good. I think people like that sort of stuff. It's too easy to just to stay with the formulaic. All right, but let's go back to formulaic now. So, how would you define being a successful wedding photographer?
wow. I think a successful wedding photographer is constantly pushing themselves to make images for themselves and for the clients, and then at the same time, they're making enough money to fulfill their dreams. I think, oftentimes we just make enough that's necessary, and I think success in any job is just making enough money to, like, do the things you want to do in life and making your life yours and being happy. And so, I guess it'd be a little tough to measure it as a wedding photographer, but just as a person, I'm successful if I'm living out my dreams. And so if I make enough money, unfortunately, this is where it's not romantic for me. Like, I'm successful if I make enough money to then be romantic, or to then like kind of follow my dreams or whatever. And so, yeah, I think for me, that's where I found success, is like pricing myself in a way that makes sure that I can sort of attain the things that I want to attain in life. And
what are those things?
Yeah, so it's just being able to travel. It's being able to buy a house, be able to save, be able to sort of be generous in the ways that I want to be generous. And
what does that mean?
Just giving back to the community, volunteering,
Yeah.
having time to just sit around the table and eat good food. Like, I know that's very simple, but that's a big part of how I live. And having the ability to even very simply have a garden and to cook good food and to host people is big, just how I live. And so, yeah, those are a few of the things. Obviously, a future family and planning for that is in there. And I'm thinking of my vision board. Like, I have a board of like things that I have, which it's kind of silly, but it's been super helpful to kind of direct my business.
I don't think it's silly at all. I think it's helpful to have, and particularly a vision one for a photographer to actually see these things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To think visually, but then to have those things kind of spur you on. It's been the most helpful thing that I've done in the past couple of years, to change everything from my pricing to how many planners I call a week, which I hated, but now I have to do those sort of things in order to make sure that the vision is actualized. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So actually having a clear picture in mind of where you want to end up and working towards that. And interesting also, you said, I hate it. So even though you don't like calling wedding planners or whatever it might be, you're still going to do it because it's
the only way to live out the dream, man. I think it's work, and I think we forget, and we're just like, oh, it's so beautiful. And my image, I don't do a lot of advertising, and so I have to call. I have to kind of do I get my work another way, is through wedding planners. I don't get it through any of the blogs, or no one's gonna. People randomly call me every now and then, but I don't get it through Instagram. I get it through the planners who believe in me and know that I'm gonna give them, solid imagery. And so
I'm actually speaking to a wedding planner next week, I think, and it was about this, how she relates with photographers. So do you just cold call them? How does it work for you to sort of establish a relationship?
Sure. Not always, but I do sometimes. I think the easiest way is to find one that you're connected with online somehow. So maybe find one that you have some sort of, like, you like their work. Like, you look and you're like, oh, I really like what they're doing, and like, be honest about it. Or you have some mutual person in common. And so for me, what I do is I might call a wedding planner, and once I talk to that wedding planner and I explain sort of who I am and what I'm trying to do with images and for my clients, at the end of the call, I might say, hey, this is what I do. Do you know any other wedding planners that would be interested in talking to me? And then I sort of get a list of names that will help me with an in for the next week. Like, okay, so-and-so said I should talk to this person. Hey, can we set up a meeting? Hey, this person, they thought we might sort of gel well together because this is what I'm trying to do. What are you trying to do? Then they talk, and
connect that way.
Yeah.
I feel like wedding planning is a much bigger industry in America. Are most weddings there run by planners?
Most weddings over sort of the $6,000 to $7,000 budget, like for the photographer. If they're starting over $7,000, then most all of them will have a wedding planner.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything like $2,000 $3,000 for the photographer, it's hit and miss, and they might not. But if you want return work for the higher end stuff, then you have to go through a planner. Yeah, they're not searching on Google at that price range to find, you know, the hippest new photographer who's gonna throw some sort of filter on their $65,000 flowers. I was just talking to a planner a couple days ago, and she was showing me, a new photographer and how they had this whole idea for the floral arrangement, and the bride wanted certain colors, but his edit was this sort of newer style where they take out some colors in the editing, and they totally, I wouldn't say ruined, but they put their aesthetic on the entire vision that the floral team and the planner and the bride had come up with. And it's one of those things I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I don't do those new skins or whatever, but they're cool at a certain range, but after a certain price point, your preset that was 99 cents is like going on top of $100,000 of work. And so it's like, you have to be careful what you're doing. And so she was like, I'll never hire this guy again. I was like, well, you can hire me, but whatever. So, but it's one of those things. It's like, oh, I hope people will start realizing that. Like, I don't mind the trends that are happening, but at the same time, we are doing work. And so when you work with people, it's, you have to figure out the sort of the side that's my work and my visual thing, my language. And then I still give family photos and pictures of the flowers. They're going to be the best that I can do, but you still have to, cater to your clients. And so.
Yeah. Knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself when you were starting out in weddings?
I think just simply would be not to start shooting cheaper weddings. I think that was a big thing for me when I started, was to start from the bottom and work my way up. And so when I started, I didn't have this vision board. I was just making enough.
Yeah.
And so I had to change my mindset to a mindset of abundance versus a mindset of sort of scarcity or lack. And that was a really big shift in the way that I ran my business. And so charging enough.
What does that look like now? So what do you do now that's different to what you did then?
It's literally just charging more for my services. It's literally like, oh, in order to make my dreams come true, I have to charge this much money. And I just wish I would have started doing that when I started. Because, if you start low at 2,000 or whatever, you have to, all your clients are going to, you'll get the same weddings. And I love shooting those weddings. I still do them every now and then, but it's going to be a lot of work to get yourself out of that price bracket. And so just thinking fiscally, I wish that I had started high so that I would have been, all the years of work would have been toiling in the same bracket. And so now every time you raise your prices, it's like you start your business over again. Especially if you have a significant jump. And so while it's working for me now, it's a lot of hard work. It took a couple of years before it really started making sense. And so, yeah.
Okay. Do you think though there's sometimes people need to start off at sort of the lower level just to get sort of practice and runs on the board doing?
Yes. I think there are other ways to do that. Maybe I like the idea of apprenticing. I think since that's how I started. I think now we get people who just come into the industry and they're ready to shoot their friend's wedding, and they buy some cameras, and I don't think that person should charge a lot of money because they have no experience. But when I actually started my own business, I had years of experience shooting higher end weddings. Because I apprenticed for a guy who did the same, but in my mind I had to start from the bottom, and so I started charging really low. And I didn't.
Right, that's interesting. Okay. If you speak to younger photographers these days, I'm guessing that happens.
Sure.
What do they usually ask you
I guess they ask they ask me a lot of technical stuff, like, how did you do this?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they're surprised at how simple it is, or just like how it's just, like, how did you make the sky white or something? I'm like, what? Like, I don't, like, I just overexposed it. I don't know,
Yeah.
and then and so I get asked a lot of technical stuff uh, more than anything else. It's just like,
Yeah.
which it's literally, it can be, you need to learn how to like stand still and hold your camera steady, and like, how'd you do this? It was so late. I'm like, I practice holding my camera steady for seconds, or how,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
or I just tell them the truth and like, listen, I failed 99 times out of 100, and then this one time I got it, and that's the
Work.
picture you're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What questions do you think they should be asking you?
Oh. Hmm. Uh, I think they should ask more business questions, like, how do I how do I make sure that I'm going to be successful? Because I can be as artistic as I want to be, but if I can't feed myself, nothing will happen, and I'll go back to window cleaning. And so
Yeah.
finding how you should talk to your clients on the phone, and what you should, how to set up your website, how to set your pricing up, and all those questions. I think any photographer who's been doing it for longer than 5 or 6 years has had to work through all those things. And so I think newer photographers see the glamour, and they're like, oh, tell me, what f-stop were you shooting at? I'm like, that's not going to get you anywhere. Like, it's
Yeah.
cool, but
Yeah.
you have to put food on the table. Like, there's a reality that you have to make money doing this. And so, yeah.
Yeah. How have you learnt the business side of this? Has it been trial and error, or have you studied, or?
Both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trial and error. And then I literally, 2 years ago, I hired a business coach because I knew that
Okay.
it was a place that I lack.
Yeah.
And so she is not in the wedding industry at all. She was literally she does business and sales coaching, and she was expensive, but I knew that if I was going to sort of attack this other market, that I needed to have someone sort of spell out to me how to make sales, how to talk to clients, how to talk to planners, like all that stuff that I was telling you is stuff that I talk through with a coach. And so I hired someone to come on board and sort of partner with the business, and
Yeah.
that's how I'm moving forward now.
Yeah. Okay. And has that made a big change in your business?
Yeah, 100%. So I think before it, I wasn't shooting just to talk numbers. I wasn't shooting over 10 grand, but that was one of the goals. And so now I'm consistently booking higher end weddings. And a lot of that was just making a lot of phone calls I didn't want to make. But and then learning how to have those conversations, and then like what to, you know, talking about the language on my website. This lady that I hired helped a lot with that. So
Right. What do
it
you mean by
changed
that?
it.
The language?
Sure. So um, just the wording, but on some of the like the ethos on my website. And so I talked a little bit about sort of this mentality of lack versus this mentality of abundance.
Yeah.
And that's something that she talked to about with me a lot, is because I grew up in poverty. I didn't grow up, with a lot. And so
Yeah.
coming out of that on this other side, in the way that I used to have my website, it wasn't bad. But when I was redoing it, I made sure that, I said some things that I knew that might attract a certain clientele,
Yeah.
or, and so for me and us working through that, even as simply as having the color, like the visual of gold on my website, which I think you know, is a little cheesy, but it has sort of this mark of luxury, and that's what I'm going for. And so I'm trying to speak to a different clientele than, like, I don't know that I would have wanted that personally, but if
Yeah.
if that's the brand that I'm going for, and I'm like, okay, I get it now. Like, and
Yes.
so things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think the future looks like for you? The next sort of 10 or 15 years in photography and your brand?
Sure. Yeah. So we're expanding. We're going to start another company just because once you start getting the inquiries, I think it's the wisest thing is to make sure that I sort of let everyone know about that, and so or everyone, I want everyone to get to shoot weddings, and so if my friends who aren't shooting as much want to still shoot, and I can sort of be a little bit more of a businessman, I think that's kind of where my mind
Yeah.
is expanding a little bit. But I think I'll continue to shoot for the next 10 to 15 years, kind of doing what I'm doing now. I love it, and just keep creating. And so, yeah, so it's going well. I think making sure that I keep saving money, and man, it's funny that I'm talking about money so much, but it's been a big change in my business. It's just kind of like, oh, it's art and it's great. And I love that side of it. But now I'm like, oh, what's my IRA looking like? And I need to like save money as a self-employed person. I have to make sort of these changes to make sure that I'm, set up for the future, and my family's set up for the future, and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, we're just kind of churning away, doing that, creating images, and preparing for the future.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
What am I looking forward to? Let's see. I think I'm looking forward to not being nervous at weddings. I still get that little bit of butterfly thing before, and I've been shooting long enough that I shouldn't.
Yeah.
But I think, especially as I start shooting bigger weddings, blah blah blah, it's just like, oh man, this is tough, and it's a lot of work. And slowly, I'm like starting to cruise, and I don't ever, you don't ever want to be comfortable. Like, I don't want to be comfortable. I want to keep having a little bit of stress about making photos just to push myself. But I am looking forward to not that I want it to be easy, but I want to just be like, all right, this is what I do. Like, we're doing this, and I'm there to a certain extent, but that's a big part of like my day is just like, oh man, this is going to be a big job. Let's do it. And so it's just a lot. I think it's part of the artistic process, honestly. I say that now I'm rambling, but you know what I'm saying.
No.
Yeah.
No, I get that. I think because it's if you are approaching it as an art, as it's you there, and you're feeling that sort of weight of that, then of course it's going to have significance and meaning, and you're going to feel the nerves.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean,
if you're not feeling anything, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time and your insights. I'm gonna let you off the hook.
I feel like
now.
I was just like, yeah. Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be on here and to chat with you.
I appreciate it. So, if people want to follow you, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so AdonyeJaja.com. Or on Instagram is Adonye Jaja. It's ADONYEJAJA on Instagram, and that's probably the best place is to
You're hanging out there most.
Yeah, that's where I am. I'm gonna try to get back on Twitter, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
There's some funny voices on Twitter at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah. All right, man. Thanks so much. Take care, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Cheers, man. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.